opportunities that presented to us. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of people won't know what the Crick is. I get regular questions. So before I start the presentation, we've got a small video.
The Francis Crick Institute is a brand new biomedical research institute which will investigate the basic biology that underpins human disease.
We've got this 21st century biomedical research facility in the heart of London.
It's a grouping of the most exciting science. We work across disciplines and across boundaries. So we have a huge amount of biological science, but we also have chemists and physicists, mathematicians, all of whom contribute to a new way of working, a new way of answering biomedical questions.
Francis Crick was probably the greatest biologist of the 20th century from the United Kingdom. If Francis came in here, I think he would think the building was very big. Scientists get inspired by the creation of knowledge, by understanding how the world works.
We're explorers in the same way as astronomers looking out into space and looking at faraway galaxies, but we're focusing down on the smallest of scales.
I think that curiosity of, okay, well, we know this happens, but how does it happen? Wouldn't you like to know?
Sometimes I look at what's been achieved here and I can't quite believe it. To actually produce what is probably the most vast and interesting and exciting biomedical research laboratory in the world. A cathedral of science that will push back the boundaries of our understanding to help society tackle and deal with human disease. Welcome to the Crick.
So that's the Francis Crick Institute. We're not a university, we're a biomedical research institute. We have postdocs, PhD students, so we have an academic environment, but what we don't have is undergraduate students. So we're a little different from the universities that are represented here. And I'm very grateful to you, CISA, for asking me to come along and talk. This is our favourite topic of conversation, and usually the problem is stopping me rather than getting us to talk about it. So I will try and keep to my time slot. Just to recap some of the key facts, we were founded by 6 partners, CIUK, the MRC and the Wellcome Trust, and then Imperial, King's and UCL, the big London scientific-based universities, all of whom put money in, but the universities oversee our PhDs from an academic perspective as well. Cancer Research and the MRC were the people who put labs into this. So the video said 1250 scientists. I think we're around that sort of number. It was about 650 from each of those organisations. I'll talk a little bit more about that. You can see the construction cost was 650 million. We're about 17.5 football fields in size. So it's a big building. I've been responsible as CIO for the Crick since November 2013, so just coming up to 3.5 years. The building was up when I joined, but the internals weren't built. But I used to joke with my team that I would walk round it and think, wow and oh something in equal measure. Because it's quite a lot of pressure to deliver IT for a building that's as iconic as this one is. I'm not going to talk a lot about what we did. I will talk a little bit about what we've done on route, but really what I want to talk about, because I know what I find interesting when I sit out where you are, is that the challenges, the pitfalls, the lessons learned, not that we did all this wonderfully. So the key stages that we've gone through, initially we were separate organisations. There was a very small organisation at the Wellcome Trust. When I joined, it was the project team that was about 100 of us. I was actually employee number 54. So we were a very small project organisation at the Wellcome Trust, and then there were the Cancer Research Labs at Lincoln's Inn Fields, Clare Hall, and labs at Mill Hill that were run by the MRC. But they were completely separate organisations. We then did a merger in April 2015 to bring those together as one logical Crick structure, but still sitting on those separate sites. And we didn't start moving into the new building until August of last year. So we had to run in that multi-site way for quite a considerable period. And then from August to December, we were moving into the building. Now we're in what I refer to as our stabilisation phase. We were actually supposed to get the building in about May 2016. In fact, we were originally supposed to get it in November 2015. We rejigged the whole project plan to May, but we had a hard stop for getting out of the former sites by December of last year. So we had to compress a 38-week migration plan into 18 weeks, which has left us with some compromises, inevitably. So we're in what I would now refer to as a stabilisation phase, which hopefully is going to be as short as possible, but realistically I would say 1 to 2 years to get ourselves properly stabilised in the building, and then hopefully in something that approximates to normal. You're never quite normal when you're working with a gang of research scientists. They've always got new and exciting things to challenge you with, but normal for us. Oh, by the way, if anyone spotted the same PowerPoint graphic as the last presenter, well done. So phase one was our kind of logical merger to get us into the same structure. And these were some of the key projects. I won't dwell on these. This is not about, we were all wonderful. We were, clearly, but it's not about we did wonderful things. It's about what we learnt from those. So we had to set up an HR system, initially running for 100 people, and then suddenly, whoosh, on the 1st of April 2015, running for 1,500 people. And data migration, which I will come back to. Finance and procurement systems, the same. One day you're running for 100 people in basically an office setup. The next day you're running for 4 sites, 3 of which are lab sites that want to procure things like mice, or liquid nitrogen, or radioactive chemicals, which, funny enough, the office environment didn't need. They wanted pens. So some of those challenges were interesting. 1,800 email accounts and about 2 teras of historical email, because, of course, the scientists wanted all of their old emails to come with them. Nothing as good as starting it clean. Oh, and they weren't all on Exchange to start with. We had to set up an intranet site for the new Crick environment to give us a sense of community. And an integrated internet site, so bringing all of the former sites together. And we had to create a temporary federated support model so we could provide support across all the 4 sites, but not invest too much in it, because that wasn't where we were ending up. So we managed to do all of those. And then we got into, this really should be actually building delivery and migration. So then we got into the bit about the building and getting the building set up and moving people into it. And the key projects for that, and there were more than 70 of them. So having just come out of the 1st of April 2015, we didn't get much time to sit back on our laurels and go, right, done that. We're then straight into, OK, get the building up and running. And at that stage, we thought that was for November 2015, so we really didn't have a lot of time. So a lot of these had started in advance. Oh, damn, too many. So network and unified comms. So we've got a full Cisco network. We're running, for people who like the nerdy details, twin 10-gig cores up each corner of the building, where we need to move a lot of research data. We've got the full unified comms suite from Cisco. We had to get the initial scientific computing set up, 2.5 petabytes of storage, 3,000 cores of compute. We had to migrate something of the order of 2,000 end-user devices, and scientists being scientists, that's not a nice, stable platform of standards. That's Mac, Wintel, and Linux. And they came from different sites with different domains, all sorts of fun stuff like that. Migration of websites and databases. We migrated of the order of 25 end-user websites. So this was independent of our own website. We had scientists who were running their own some of which were used externally facing, and about 100 databases that were used, again, end-user databases, not our own. Multifunction device implementation sounds trivial. My background is I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I've been putting in MFD since about 1998, I think. Unfortunately, it was rocket science for the legacy institutes. They all had personal printers. This led to a number of the learnings that I will come back to. So it may sound daft to put it up there because it's a no-brainer for a lot of organizations, but it was a very interesting exercise. I think one of the lessons learned about these things is very much it's not the technology. You know, and what seems to be innovative technology can be easy to put in. What seems to be very basic technology can be challenging. And that was one of those. And the last one was the wayfinding app. I'm lucky enough, and I'll come back to the team, to work with a very good team of people. This is not about me having done it on my own, far from it. But one of the joys I occasionally have as CIO is that I can take the Jean-Luc Picard view of the world and go, make it so. And wayfinding was one of those. It was a bit of a personal bugbear, because when I first walked around the building inside, I thought, gosh, I'm going to get lost in here. And my background is running help desk, so I thought, and the help desk team are going to get lost in here finding users. So I went back to my team and went, wayfinding. So we built a wayfinding app for the building. It wasn't our biggest project financially, but in terms of what it says about what we want to be and do, and what it says to some of our PhDs and postdocs coming in about how we want to adopt digital, is important to me. So, we'll go forward, honestly. There we are. So we managed to do all of those as well. Again, not without pain, and that's where that's where it gets into the important stuff. The lessons learned, which is much the most interesting thing of the whole thing. What were the challenges? What were the lessons we learned? Or what were the lessons we remembered? Actually, a lot of these will be things that you know as well. There were things that we did wrong. There were things that we did right, but kind of inadvertently, and you look back and go, oh, that was useful. I'll do that again next time. So it was quite interesting to reflect. Sorry, got a skipping problem on the data challenges. I won't talk about research data yet. I'll come on to that and data growth challenges. But just in terms of the move, the data challenges were interesting. So I talked about the HR system. Now, there's a phrase that I guess most people are aware of in acting, where people say, never work with animals and small children. I think the equivalent phrase in IT should be never migrate data. It's always best avoided, in my view. Unfortunately, there are times when you can't. And one of those for us was the HR system, where we had to migrate data for people coming, so 650 from each organization, different terms and conditions, different pensions, into the new HR system. It was a nightmare. It did look a bit like spaghetti. We needed a lot of support, and the legacy institutes actually didn't have their HR systems run by themselves. They had them run by head offices. So we had to try and get the attention of head office functions to get their time, because they understood the systems and the data. The trouble was they didn't understand the people. So we had to have people from the institutes and people from the head offices and our own team and the supplier teams to really get this moved across, which was a challenge. And the usual thing of, you know, we get it in the neck quite a bit, I have to say, for the HR system, most of which is down to the quality of the legacy data. So never underestimate the data challenges. The other one is, if anyone's ever involved in moving research computing hardware, we moved about 1.5 petabytes of storage. That was interesting because it had never been fully backed up. It had been sort of tactically backed up, because it's difficult to back up those things. And when you're picking up a box and moving it, or when I'm picking up a box and moving it, someone's doing it on my behalf, I kind of want to know that if we drop it on someone's foot en route, that we're going to be able to get the data back. Don't worry about the foot too much, but I do want to know that we'll get the data back. So we had to get the data backed up fully off those boxes in order to be able to move them. And that took longer than we anticipated. So there are some things that I would think about earlier, do differently in those areas. The other big challenge, as I alluded to earlier, it is all about people. It really is all about the people. This is the classic people, process, technology triangle. And in that triangle, it is very much about the people. So I'm working with scientists who come in all shapes and sizes. In fact, the one thing about that is that most of those have got lab coats on, which I was party to a discussion about the need to wear lab coats in the Crick, which caused a minor furore and made me feel that the IT challenges were relatively simple. And I won't say we're unique. Everyone does this. Our organisation is unique because we're not. But what is interesting is dealing with experts. So it's not scientists are unique, but there is something very interesting in particular, and you guys will have it in your organisation, about dealing with experts. Now, I'm lucky. I don't have an expert computer science department, which is a good thing, as I suspect many of the universities do, and that, I always think that must be a terrific challenge for you guys when you're trying to run IT, is to have computer science experts who tell you what to do. I don't have those. However, this does not stop medical experts or research experts thinking that they are experts in IT. It's amazing how someone who is expert in one field assumes they're expert in all of them, including mine. So I used to deal with expert medics in my last job, where I was at the MHRA, the medicines regulator. And they're just as bad as expert biologists and so on. So it's really interesting, but also they do come in all flavours. So you have to try and deal with all the different varieties of scientists. We have our fair share of prima donnas. So we've got the people who are the rock stars of the science world. The video mentioned 9 Nobel Prizes. We've got people getting various prizes all the time, which is very nice. But that means if they want something done, it tends to get airtime. And then we've got people who are just coming up in their careers and who are really at the foundation of what they're doing. So one of the things I've learnt, and this was an inadvertent one, so here's where we get into the learnings. I hadn't realised about the power of time. So I mentioned the MFDs earlier, and they were one of my big challenges. Not so much the MFDs, but the corollary that you are not bringing your personal printer to the Crick, by the way. So we wanted to do this. We had 200 different models of personal printer. This was nuts from a support perspective. Everyone had their own little printer in their own office. They liked that. One of my scientists actually said, I'm going to bring my own printer and my own coffee machine. Why the hell should I move to a coffee point and a printer? I don't understand what this collaboration stuff is about. Now, given that collaboration is one of the core pillars of the Crick strategy, you do kind of wonder. It did give me a hint, though, because I then went, the MFDs are strategic. They're encouraging people to collaborate, which is a helpful argument. But I went out and talked to the scientists. As it turned out, relatively early, the building delay helped me in this respect. And I just went out and said, we are going to do this. And not much more. I put my cards on the table and said, look, we want to put in MFDs. We don't want personal printers. Here's why. We will come out and consult with you. They went up in flames. We had a small debate. It was a very lively discussion. It was quite fun, actually. I should say here, my father's a biochemist, so I was brought up by a scientist, so I know the breed, and I've been brought up with academic debate forever. So we had quite a fun debate, which was good fun. And I went away and left it and said, we'll come back and consult. About 8 weeks later, I got an email from my CFO. She said, you'll be thrilled. I've just been out on site and I've heard 2 scientists talking. And one of them said to the other, oh, we're getting MFDs in the new building. And the other one said, yeah, of course. And then the power of time to just let that become the new normal, and actually without having to get in their face again and say it. I hadn't thought about what that does, but letting things percolate is not a bad thing, and also getting out early. So I think oftentimes, and I've been guilty of this, when you've got bad news to deliver, you sort of put it off until you absolutely have to do it. And actually with this lesson, I would tend to go out there very early and get my cards on the table and then let them think about it. This is another, these are the bleeding obvious, I have to say. Apologies for that, but it's really good to go through this and learn them again, I think, or it has been for me. Getting down with people and not talking to them from a height. I'm fortunate enough, as I said, my dad's a research biochemist. I was a research chemist at Glaxo before I got into IT. Actually getting out there with the users. I see the difference in my team, the people who get out and talk to the users in their own territory and the people who don't. And that you cannot, absolutely cannot underestimate the power of that, of going out, trying to understand what they're doing and what their need is. I had a discussion with a member of staff only this week. We've got a user who wants to ship 20 terabytes of data to Canada. We've got a high-speed link, an SFTP server. We could do that over the network. The Canadian organisation has said our FTP server won't even receive 20 terabytes of data, can't do it. So there was a request, OK, can we put it on a disk? Fortunately, we happen to have a spare QNAP disk knocking around. So I said to the guys, look, as long as we can encrypt it, we can get it on a disk and ship it. One of my team said, oh, but we always get dumped on like this. We shouldn't just react because they had a need. And I said, well, hang on. Think about it from the scientist's point of view. They don't know what else we've got on. All they know is they've got a need to ship 20 teras of data. And they've got an urgent research project, and this is one of our rockstar ones. They've got an urgent research project, and so from their world, they just see a need. 20 teras of data, must get it to this person to do analysis. And I said, actually, when it comes to me, I don't know what your team have got on. So I will just ask the question. If we have something that we're doing that needs to take priority, then we need to communicate, and we need to then explain to the scientist that, well, that's all very well, but here's why we can't do it now. I said, I will get very cross if I find the team have done this, and then you turn around to me a week later and say, well, of course we were late on that thing for Paul Nurse, because we were doing this for someone else. And I will be saying, well, why did no one tell me? So actually getting down there, in with people, and talking is really important, both ways. So actually being able to explain the IT perspective to the scientists and being able to understand where they're coming from. This is one of my biggest learnings, and comes from my last job as well as this one. If you've done Myers-Briggs, this is what I call when Myers-Briggs T's go F. So you've got a bunch of scientists who are logical. But when you put them through change, they have an emotional reaction to it. And the problem is, because they are logical scientists, they can't be having an emotional reaction. So the way they tend to frame it is in questions that appear to be spuriously logical. And you receiving them will receive this question and will be tempted to answer it. And this is not really dealing with the underlying problem. The best example of this I had was in my last job, actually, at the MHRA, where we moved 1,100 people, including expert medics, to a new building with open desk and open plan and hot desk. Just conflated the two. Which was really, really exciting. They didn't like it, funnily enough. And I ran the vision project for the move, not just the IT, the whole vision project for the move. And in the run-up, one of the senior medics said, the building's looking a bit tatty. And the temptation is to go, yes, of course. We were going to revamp the whole building. But what's underpinning that question is, I'm not happy. And actually trying to understand that. I spent a lot of time wishing I could say to people, you poor sad sausage, what you really need is a hug. Because the danger is, if you answer their questions, you haven't dealt with that underpinning emotional reaction. So what you get back are another lot of questions. And your day just becomes more and more emails with questions. You get into a really long email correspondence, which is a waste of everyone's time and doesn't deal with the underpinning thing. So actually trying to give people, without saying, you poor sad sausage, you need a hug, trying to give people some emotional reassurance and deal with some of the underpinning questions of, we're trying to create an environment where you can do your job. Those are the sort of things that really worry them. And actually reassure them indirectly about how we're trying to do that is really important. People, as I said, are important, and I've talked a lot about the scientists. The IT team are equally important as people. This is my IT team. I put them up there partly as a thank you as well, because they have been phenomenal in delivering all of this. Like I said, I couldn't do it on my own, and we're very lucky to have some very good people. This was the organisational structure, without the names in it, that I kind of inherited when I arrived. When I arrived, there were about 6 names in that. And what became apparent very quickly was this was designed for business as usual, which is all very well, but we had quite a lot of projects to do. We also had an interesting mix of new staff, of legacy staff from both institutes, and then we had to add in a set-up project team. So we went and outsourced a lot of the set-up project team, bringing in our own team to make sure that we were doing the strategy and we were developing things that they were comfortable with. But making sure that in all of this, you're not always focusing outward on the scientists, and actually building the IT team is the other challenge. And then the final challenge, and this echoes back, I don't know how many people were in the talk yesterday on being brilliant. That resonated hugely with me, because when we hit delays, the importance of positive thinking was enormous. You know, I was having to ask the team to replan on a regular basis. And we got to the point where I actually said, don't replan. We could do 100 plans, and if we were lucky, 99 of them would be wrong. Chance was 100%, 100 of them would be wrong, and we would be doing something else. So, as I was saying, we had delays that went from November 15, when the building should have been delivered. We had an intermediate point in February 16, which frankly I didn't believe in but had to plan to. And then the May delivery date, which was supposed to be a hard stop in May, which didn't happen. We were then planning for starting to go live in the building in May, with about a 2-3 month window where we were going to get the Institute operations ourselves, building services, everyone in order to start getting up and running and establish ourselves, work out where the help desk was, let them find their way around the building, sort of thing, before scientists started arriving in August. Moving labs is non-trivial, considerably more complicated than moving office staff, and moving big bits of NMR kit, mass spec, is even less trivial. So we put in a plan that said we were going to start moving labs, I think it was around the 12th of August last year, whatever that weekend was, with the idea that that gave us a sufficient buffer, even if things went a bit late on the 31st of May, that gave us a buffer to get things up and running. We actually took delivery of the building at about 4:20, I think it was, on the Friday afternoon of that 12th of August weekend. So suddenly we were moving IT, building services, everyone at the same time as we were moving the first labs. And the project plan was that we moved labs every weekend from that point forward. So as soon as we hit that point, we were on a treadmill. So actually being able to keep the team positive, up and working well during this period when we had a hiatus, we were all really worried. My overall program manager's phrase was "world of pain." That was his catchphrase. We're going to be in a world of pain if we're not careful. And we were all very worried that what we were going to be was in a world of pain. But actually, one of the things from a leadership perspective, you cannot let that show. You have to keep the team positive and on track. And I personally have a huge belief that thinking positive, you won't always get a perfect outcome, but you'll always get a better outcome. So that was really important. And finally, and what I kept saying to the team was that, you know, we're all going to be really pleased. When this building is up and running, it's going to be amazing. We are going to be a pain in the neck to everyone who follows us, because we'll be the people going, I remember when it started, and I was here when, and all those things. But it was only when the building was finally delivered. And it was lovely. I had one of my team, one of my direct reports, come to me and say, I've got it. Yeah, I've realised what this was all about, and I really feel good about it. And that was fantastic, because a lot of the team hadn't been through big projects. they didn't know what the big project payoff was. And it was only when they saw the building, and that's been fantastic, that they really have now seen the payoff for all of their hard work. So those are some of the lessons learned. Happy to talk more war stories at any point. But we're still, as I say, in a stabilisation phase. So we've got some projects that we're doing. Our off-site data centre, the Crick has a data centre on the roof of the building because we use chimney cooling. But it's only a finite capacity, and we are landlocked in the middle of London. We're not going to extend it. So we knew very early on that we were going to need an off-site DC capability. In fact, we use it for some collaborative work that I will come on to. So we went out. In fact, my second day, I had a meeting with JISC and various other organisations, King's, UCL, Sanger EBI, to talk about where we could develop an off-site data centre, which became JISC's Southern Data Centre, I think it's formally called now. We haven't started putting Crick-specific stuff in there, or hadn't, until literally the last month. So we've been getting that up and running, some for our backup and disaster recovery, some for some of our systems. We need to complete our research computing platform. I'll come on to that. We've all got in a bit of a scramble because it was 18 weeks instead of 38 weeks. So we're going through an effective operations project. And now thinking about, yeah, we've done that. What do we do next? Have a rest. This is again, I won't go into technical details. I realise this is quite a mixed audience. Anyone who wants technical details, happy to talk about those or point you at the right person who knows more than I do. But this is a broad outline of what our research computing platform is going to look like. In fact, what it actually looks like, so the things that are greyed out we don't quite have yet. We have the high availability tier, which is the 2.5 petabytes. We've got some batch compute, that's 3,000 cores. Our middle working tier is legacy kit that we moved from the former institute, so it's got to be stripped down, refactored. We've got some nearline archive, we've got some backup. So we're still developing all of this. And the reason we're developing it is that we're going to be dealing with a lot of gene sequencing. Well, we are dealing with a lot of gene sequencing. And, oops. Yeah, doesn't like that slide. And imaging data. And in fact, I mean, for biomedical research, the gene sequencing data has been on the increase for ages. The imaging data is really interesting because that's where the new frontier, I think, lies, both in terms of capture and visualization. So the challenge is, just having talked about the data, that mouse very quickly changed from a small one to a large one. I won't try and make it do it. When I started, about a week after I started at the Crick, Nature published an article that talked about mouse brain tomography and said that new techniques would allow you to generate data in mouse that was of the order of 60 petabytes per mouse. Yeah, this is ridiculous. So my reaction to which was a slight bout of hysteria and, OK, the scientists can have one mouse a year and it better be stupid. And we'll get the IT budget out of the mouse budget. But those things are really happening. We have invested, thanks to the MRC, which I'm sure the rest of the organisation is very grateful for. I have ambivalent views. The MRC gave us some money to invest in 2 cryo-electron microscopes, Cryos microscopes they're called, Titans. These things kick out 4 terabytes a day. That's just those 2. Never mind what I had before. Half a petabyte I'm looking at every 6 months, just for those 2 bits of kit. Oh, and we're buying another one. So the data capture challenge is huge. And biomedical, unlike astronomy, and Lucy Collins in the video talked about being like astronomy, but astronomers tend to capture a load of data and filter it down. Biomedical guys tend to capture data and then do a lot of analysis that increases the size of it. So there are some real challenges about biomedical that haven't been explored. The other one, the lady with the case, what I am realizing is, and coming out of mostly a pharmaceutical background, when you leave a pharmaceutical company, if you say you're going to take your data with you, they threaten to sue. If you're in academia, you want to. And so I've got people rocking up saying, by the way, I've got 50 terabytes from Cambridge that we need to bring over. Yeah, okay. I actually had one of our guys say to me, senior director, say, you'll be really glad that we didn't recruit this last person. They wanted 1 to 2 petabytes. Okay. And this is all a waste of time and space. Yeah, we're moving data around between ourselves. And it's going to get worse. So I'm a bit of an evangelist at the moment about how do we stop these caseloads of data? Is there something that we can do in the cloud to actually create a metaphorical briefcase so that we are not spending time, with Cambridge spending time and effort taking data out of their system and me spending time and effort getting data into mine. It's all moving deck chairs on the Titanic. So there's got to be a way of doing something about that, I kind of feel. The plethora of clouds, the last presentation talks a bit about that. We're talking to Google, to Amazon, to Microsoft, we're TARPs, we'll talk to anybody. And we're doing tests with all of them to see what works best for our researchers. I suspect the bottom line will be we will use all of them depending on which works best in particular situations. Yeah, the Crick is an amalgamation of a lot of fairly autonomous research labs. Me saying we have got a standard is not going to go anywhere. So the plethora of private, public, collaborative clouds and working out where you put things is, I think, still something we're working through. And then visualization of data. Again, this is sort of biomedical specific, but I do have a personal enthusiasm. We've got the sequencing data, we've got the imaging data. These are all very different data types. I would love to see a kind of minority report view that I could give my scientists where they go, I want this from here, this from here, this from there, and we can just bring it together. We can't do that yet. Biomedical is very much in its infancy around visualization, and I think there is a lot of opportunity as well as challenge in that area. So those are the sorts of things that we will be looking at going forward. On top of that, we have something we call the wider Crick. So one of our pillars, as I mentioned earlier, is collaboration. And we're really keen to collaborate with people. The reason we went to the Offsite Data Centre early was for something that was called eMedLab, which is shown on the slide here, which was a collaboration between Sanger, EBI, UCL, ourselves, funded by the MRC to the tune of about 9 million for both IT infrastructure and people. About 5 million of it was for the IT. And that's helped us to create a private cloud collaborative environment where we can share data but also have secure areas. And I think that's been a good model for the type of working that we want to see collaboratively across the industry. So understanding how we share our data. The Crick is both a generator of data, but we won't survive if all we do is try and generate our own data. We need to be a consumer of data sets and have an interlinkage between data sets for our scientists to be able to work. So the wider Crick and the wider collaboration, we have industrial collaborations with GSK that's been announced some time ago now, Link Labs, and we're talking to other organizations. So that's a little bit about the Crick. A final passing thought from me on lessons learned. The Crick, for me, has been a unique opportunity. When I joined it, one of the things I said was this was like doing everything I'd ever done in my career, from the operational systems through to the research IT, but doing it all at once. It has been a unique opportunity, and one of the crucial things about unique opportunities, I'm a bit of a pedant, there's not slightly unique and there's not very unique. There is only unique, and unique opportunities, from my point of view, should stay that way. So I think this is, I am not looking for my next Crick. Oh, thank you. Do you want to take questions?